The corridor spun sideways and Lieutenant Kim Dae-ho felt his knees buckle. One moment he was walking beside Ambassador Choi Yuna toward the conference room, and the next moment the cold metal floor was rushing up to meet his face. He heard Yuna's sharp intake of breath, felt hands grabbing at his uniform jacket, but everything seemed far away, like he was underwater. "Medical emergency, Deck 7, Section C," someone was shouting into a communicator. Dae-ho tried to speak, to tell them he was fine, that he just needed a moment. But his tongue felt thick in his mouth and his chest burned with each breath. The medical bay ceiling was too bright. Dae-ho squinted against the harsh lights, aware of movement all around him. Alien voices spoke in languages he didn't understand, though the translator implant in his ear buzzed with partial translations. Something about blood analysis, something about cellular degradation. He wanted to ask questions, but a mask covered his face, pumping cool oxygen into his lungs. A figure leaned over him. She had pale blue skin that glistened like it was always wet, and large dark eyes that seemed too kind for a military medical station. Her hands were webbed, gentle as she adjusted the monitor attached to his wrist. "Lieutenant Kim," she said softly, her voice carrying a musical quality.
"I am Valeth."
"I will be caring for you. Try not to move too much." Dae-ho managed a small nod. The burning in his chest had dulled to a heavy ache. He could breathe easier now, though each inhale still felt like work. Through the transparent walls of his medical pod, he could see other patients. A creature with 6 arms floated in a tank of green liquid. Something that looked like a walking tree stood perfectly still, connected to tubes that dripped silver fluid. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time felt strange in the medical bay, where the lights never dimmed and the air smelled like chemicals and something sweet he couldn't identify. Valeth came and went, always checking his monitors, always offering that same gentle expression. Other medical staff appeared too. A tall insectoid doctor with clicking mandibles spent a long time studying a holographic display of what Dae-ho assumed was his body scan. Captain Lee Hana arrived on the 3rd day. Dae-ho knew it was the 3rd day because she told him so. His commanding officer stood at the edge of his pod, her face carefully neutral in that way military people learned to hide their emotions. "How are you feeling?" Hana asked. "Like I got hit by a cargo transport," Dae-ho said. His voice came out rough, scratchy. "What's the diagnosis?" Hana glanced at Valeth, who had quietly appeared beside her. The nurse's large eyes seemed even sadder than usual. "Perhaps we should wait for Dr. Morvek," Valeth said. "I want to know now," Dae-ho said. He tried to sit up, but Valeth's webbed hand pressed firmly against his shoulder. "Please, Lieutenant, stay still." She looked at Hana again, then back to Dae-ho. Her hand was still on his shoulder, and he could feel it trembling slightly. "You have Vorathan plague." The words hung in the air. Dae-ho had heard of it. Everyone who traveled in space had heard of it. Vorathan plague was one of those diseases that medical training programs used as an example of worst-case scenarios. Fast-acting, highly lethal, no known cure. "How long?" Dae-ho asked. His voice was steady. He felt oddly calm, like he was asking about someone else's prognosis. Valeth's hand tightened on his shoulder. Her other hand reached for his, and he felt her webbed fingers wrap around his palm. It was against protocol. Medical staff weren't supposed to touch patients like this, weren't supposed to show emotion. But Valeth held his hand anyway, and when Dae-ho looked at her face, he saw tears forming in those large dark eyes. 2 weeks, she whispered. "Maybe less. I am so sorry." The tears spilled down her blue cheeks, and Dae-ho found himself squeezing her hand back, trying to comfort her even though he was the one dying. Captain Hana looked away, her jaw tight. Dr. Morvek arrived then, his insectoid legs clicking rapidly against the floor. "Nurse Valeth, please maintain professional composure," he said, but his tone wasn't unkind. He turned to Dae-ho, his compound eyes reflecting the overhead lights. "Lieutenant Kim, I apologize for the delay in diagnosis. The plague presents differently in humans than in most species. Your survival rate is approximately 3%. Those few who have survived suffered severe neurological damage." "So I'm dying," Dae-ho said simply. "Yes," Dr. Morvek confirmed. "The plague attacks your cells from the inside. Your immune system is fighting, but it cannot win. Within 2 weeks, your organs will begin to fail. We can manage the pain, keep you comfortable, but we cannot save you." Dae-ho nodded slowly. He looked at his hand, still clasped in Valeth's webbed fingers. Her tears continued to fall, dripping onto their joined hands. He'd never seen a Rindari cry before. He hadn't known they could. I need to send some messages, Daeho said. To my sister, Sujin. To my family. Can I do that? Of course, Hana said quickly. Whatever you need. And I'd like to record some things. Thoughts, maybe, for after. Daeho paused, considering his words. My sister likes to know the reasons why people do things. I should explain this to her. Valeth made a sound, something between a sob and a gulp. How can you be so calm? She asked. You are dying, human. Your life is ending. How can you speak of messages and recordings like you are planning a trip? Daeho smiled at her. It was a real smile, not forced or brave. Just genuine. Because I am planning a trip in a way. Just a one-way journey instead of a round trip. And I'd rather spend my last 2 weeks talking to people than screaming at the universe. The universe doesn't care if I scream. But you should be angry, Valeth insisted. You should be fighting, demanding we save you. You can't save me, Daeho said gently. Dr. Morvek said so. Getting angry won't change that. It'll just make these 2 weeks harder for everyone, especially you. And you've been nothing but kind to me, Nurse Valeth. I won't repay that kindness with anger. Valeth stared at him, her tears still flowing. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the room. She pressed her forehead against their clasped hands, a gesture of deep respect in Rindari culture. I will care for you, she said, her voice muffled, until the end. I promise you this. Thank you, Daeho said. Captain Hana cleared her throat. I'll arrange for the communication equipment, and I'll notify Earth Command. They'll want to know. Tell them not to make a fuss, Daeho said. I'm just one soldier. There's a war still happening. People need to focus on that, not on me. But even as he said it, Daeho knew that wasn't how it would work. News traveled fast in space, especially bad news. Soon everyone would know that Lieutenant Kim Daeho was dying of Vorthan plague. Soon the questions would start. The visitors would come, and his quiet death would become something public. He looked at Valeth again, at her blue tear-stained face. Will you stay with me? While I record my messages. She nodded, unable to speak. Her hand remained in his, warm and wet and trembling. Outside the medical pod, the station continued its endless rotation, and somewhere in the distance, stars continued to burn. Daeho had 2 weeks left to say goodbye to all of it. He found he wasn't afraid, just sad. Sad that he wouldn't see his sister grow older, wouldn't taste his mother's kimchi again, wouldn't feel Earth's rain on his face. But fear seemed pointless now. What would come would come. All right, he said, settling back against his pillows. Let's begin. Valeth had been a nurse for 12 cycles, and she had watched many patients die. It was part of her profession, something she had trained herself to accept with clinical detachment. The Rindari were taught from birth that emotions clouded judgment, that caring too deeply led to poor decisions. Yet here she was on the 4th day of Daeho's diagnosis, sitting beside his bed during her off-duty hours, listening to him talk about his childhood in a place called Busan. The ocean was always there, Daeho said, his eyes distant with memory. You could hear it from our apartment window. Sujin used to make me take her to the beach every weekend. She'd collect shells for hours, filling her pockets until they were so heavy she could barely walk. What is a shell? Valeth asked. She had pulled a chair close to his bed, her tablet forgotten in her lap. The hard outer covering of small creatures that live in the sea. Like armor, but natural. Some are smooth, some have spirals. Sujin had hundreds of them. Daeho smiled. My mother kept telling her to throw them away, but Sujin would sneak them back into her room. She said each shell had a story. Valeth found herself smiling too. Your sister sounds stubborn. She is. Gets it from our mother. Daeho shifted slightly, and Valeth immediately checked his monitors. His vital signs were stable, though the plague continued its slow destruction inside him. What about you, Valeth? Do you have siblings? I have 12 podmates, Valeth said. We were spawned in the same breeding cycle, but we do not have the same closeness that you describe with your sister. Rindari children are raised communally. That sounds lonely, Daeho said. No one had ever suggested that Rindari culture might be lonely. Valeth opened her mouth to defend her people's ways, then closed it again. Was it lonely? She had never questioned it before. But watching Daeho's face as he spoke of his sister, hearing the warmth in his voice, she wondered what it might be like to have that kind of connection. Tell me more about Busan, she said instead. So Daeho did. He talked about street food vendors who sold spicy rice cakes that burned your mouth in the best way. He described his grandmother's garden, where vegetables grew in neat rows and butterflies landed on his shoulders. He spoke of festivals with paper lanterns floating into the night sky, each one carrying a wish. "What did you wish for?" Valeth asked. "To see the stars up close," Deho said. "Guess I got my wish. Just didn't expect the stars to be where I'd die." The words should have been bitter, but Deho said them with a gentle humor that made Valeth's chest ache. She had been crying less around him, trying to maintain her professional composure as Dr. Morvek had instructed. But it was hard. Every time she looked at Deho's calm face, every time he smiled despite his deteriorating condition, something inside her cracked a little more. Ambassador Choi Yuna visited on the 5th day. She brought a small plant in a ceramic pot, its leaves a vibrant green that seemed too alive for the sterile medical bay. "From the station garden," Yuna explained, setting it on the small table beside Deho's bed. "I thought you might like something living nearby." "It's perfect," Deho said. "Thank you." Yuna sat down, her diplomatic composure slipping to reveal worry. "How are you really doing, Deho?" "Dying mostly," Deho said with a slight grin. "But slowly. Dr. Morvek says I'm handling it well, whatever that means." "It means your body is fighting harder than expected," Valeth interjected. "Most patients at this stage are unconscious or in severe pain. You are neither." "My grandmother used to say that Kim family has hard heads," Deho said. "Maybe it extends to the whole body." Yuna laughed, but it sounded forced. She stayed for an hour, talking about inconsequential things. Station gossip, political negotiations, anything except the countdown timer that hung invisible over them all. When she left, she squeezed Deho's hand tightly. "If you need anything," she said, "I know." "Thank you, Ambassador." After Yuna departed, Valeth noticed other patients glancing toward Deho's pod. Word had spread through the medical bay. The human with the plague, the soldier who was dying peacefully. During her rounds, Valeth heard whispers, saw the way other species watched Deho with curiosity. On the 6th day, a young Keltharian patient in the pod across from Deho's asked to be moved closer. Keltharians were a crystalline species, their bodies made of living mineral. They rarely spoke to other species, preferring silence and isolation. But this one, whose name translated roughly as brightness, wanted to be near the dying human. "Why?" Dr. Morvek asked, confused. Brightness tilted their faceted head toward Deho. "He sings. It helps with the pain." Valeth hadn't known Deho was singing. She checked the audio logs and found recordings of him humming, low and soft, during the night hours when he thought everyone was asleep. Korean lullabies his mother had sung to him, melodies that carried across the medical bay and somehow brought comfort to a being made of crystal. So Brightness was moved closer and Deho began singing louder, not hiding it anymore. Other patients requested to be moved as well. Soon Deho's corner of the medical bay had become a strange gathering place, where species that normally avoided each other existed in close proximity, all drawn to the human who sang while dying. Valeth watched this happen with growing confusion. In her training, dying patients withdrew into themselves. They became bitter or silent or angry. They didn't sing. They didn't tell stories to crystalline beings. They didn't smile at the nurses and ask about their day. "I don't understand you," she told Deho on the 7th day. It was late evening by station time, and most of the medical staff had gone to rest. Valeth should have left hours ago, but she found herself staying, sitting in her usual chair beside his bed. "What don't you understand?" Deho asked. His face was thinner now, his skin paler. The plague was advancing. "How can you be like this? You know you're dying. You know there's no hope. Yet you sing, you tell stories. You ask about my podmates and whether I've tried the noodle soup from the station food court." Valeth leaned forward. "You should be grieving." Deho was quiet for a moment. "I am grieving," he said finally. "I grieve for every day I won't see. For my sister's future wedding I'll miss. For my mother who will bury her son. I grieve for all of it." "Then why do you seem so peaceful?" "Because grief and peace aren't opposites," Deho said. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. His fingers were warm, his grip weaker than it had been days ago. In Korean, we have a concept called jong. It's hard to translate exactly. It means a deep emotional connection between people, an attachment that develops over time and shared experiences. "Friendship?" Valeth suggested. "More than that. Jong is when another person becomes part of your heart. When their joy is your joy, their pain is your pain. It's what I feel for my family, for my friends, and it's what gives me peace now. Daeho squeezed her hand gently. I've lived a life full of jong. I've loved people and they've loved me. That doesn't end just because I'm dying. All those connections, all those relationships, they matter. They'll continue after I'm gone in the people who remember me. Valeth felt tears building again. But you'll be gone, dead, no longer existing. My body will be gone, Daeho agreed. But the jong I've created? That stays. In Sujin when she remembers our beach days. In my mother when she cooks the foods I loved. In you, Valeth, when you think about this conversation. He smiled at her. Isn't that a kind of immortality? To live on in the hearts of others? That's not enough, Valeth whispered. Maybe not, Daeho said. But it's what we get. So I choose to spend my remaining days creating more jong. Not raging against the inevitable. I want the people around me to remember kindness, not bitterness. When you think of me after I'm gone, I want you to smile, not cry. I'll probably do both, Valeth admitted. That's okay too. They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands still clasped. Around them, the medical bay hummed with life support systems and monitoring equipment. Brightness's crystalline body chimed softly, a sound like distant bells. Somewhere, someone was singing one of Daeho's lullabies back to him, the melody carrying across the pods. Valeth realized something then, something that went against all her training, all her cultural conditioning. She was developing jong for this human. Despite knowing he would die, despite every rational instinct telling her to maintain distance, Daeho had become part of her heart. And instead of frightening her, it felt right. Teach me more Korean words, she said quietly. So Daeho did, his voice growing softer as exhaustion claimed him. Valeth learned the word for star and ocean and sister. She learned how to say thank you and I care for you. When Daeho finally fell asleep, Valeth stayed in her chair, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath like precious coins. She had 9 days left with him, maybe 10 if he was strong. She intended to make every moment count. The journalist arrived on day 9. His name was Jin Tae-yang, and he carried a small recording device that he kept asking permission to use. Daeho said yes. Valeth wanted to say no, wanted to protect her patient from intrusion, but it wasn't her decision to make. Why did you agree to this? She asked Daeho after Tae-yang had left to review his footage. Because stories matter, Daeho said. He was sitting up in bed now, though it clearly cost him effort. His breathing had grown more labored, his movement slower. If my death can teach something, then it's worth documenting. Teach what? Valeth asked, frustrated. How to die peacefully. That seems cruel. Maybe, Daeho admitted. Or maybe it teaches that death doesn't have to be the enemy, that there's dignity in acceptance. I don't know, Valeth. I just know that hiding away feels wrong. So Tae-yang was allowed to return and his recordings went out into the Galactic network. Within 2 days, the entire station knew about the dying human in Medical Bay 3. Within 4 days, ships from neighboring systems were diverting course just to dock at the station. They came in small groups at first, a delegation of Varelli merchants who had heard about the human who faced their plague with courage, a pair of Keltharian scholars who wanted to understand how flesh-based beings processed mortality, an elderly Crolian musician who played a haunting melody on an instrument made of bone and crystal. Valeth tried to limit the visitors. He needs rest, she insisted to Dr. Morvek. These crowds will exhaust him. The patient has requested to see them, Dr. Morvek said. We cannot deny him that. So they came and Daeho welcomed them all. He spoke with the Varelli about their trading routes and learned 3 words in their clicking language. He explained human concepts of life and death to the Keltharians, who had no death in the way organic beings understood it. He listened to the Crolians' music and wept openly at its beauty. You honor me with your tears, the musician said, touching Daeho's wet cheek with a delicate claw. Few beings appreciate the sorrow songs anymore. It's beautiful, Daeho said. Sad but beautiful, like saying goodbye to someone you love. The musician made a sound like wind through empty spaces. You understand. The young ones, they want only joy songs now. They forget that sorrow has its own music. After the musician left, Daeho was exhausted but smiling. Valeth helped him lie back down, adjusting his pillows and checking his medication levels. The pain was getting worse. Dr. Morvek had increased the dosage twice, but Daeho refused anything that would make him unconscious. I want to be awake, he said. I want to see people, talk to them. Sleep comes soon enough. On day 12, something unexpected happened. A Keltharian child was brought to the medical bay, suffering from a rare condition that caused fractures in their crystalline structure. The child's name was Clarity, and they were frightened, crying in the high-pitched chime that young Keltharians made when distressed. Brightness, the adult Keltharian who had been near Deho for days now, asked if the child could be placed nearby. The human's presence brings calm, Brightness explained, so Clarity was moved to a pod next to Deho's. The child continued to cry, the sound cutting through the medical bay like shattering glass. Valeth saw Deho wince at the noise, but he didn't complain. Instead, he began to sing. It was one of the lullabies he had sung before, but this time he added words. Korean words that meant nothing to the Keltharian child, but the melody was soft and warm. Deho sang about stars and mothers and gentle rain. He sang about being brave when you were scared, about holding on when things hurt. Clarity's crying slowly faded. The child turned their faceted head toward Deho, light refracting through their body in rainbow patterns. Then Clarity did something that shocked everyone in the medical bay. The child cried. Not the chiming distress sound of Keltharians. Real tears. Liquid drops that rolled down the crystalline surface and fell onto the floor, where they hardened into tiny diamonds. That's impossible, Brightness said, their voice vibrating with shock. Keltharians do not produce tears. We are not biologically capable. But Clarity was crying, tears streaming down their transparent face, and the child was reaching toward Deho with desperate urgency. Valeth quickly adjusted the pod so they were side by side, and Deho reached through the barrier to place his hand against the crystal surface, where Clarity's hand pressed from the other side. It's okay, Deho said softly. I know you're scared. Being hurt is scary, but you're going to be fine. The doctors here are good. They'll fix your fractures. Are you scared? Clarity asked in their chiming voice. Sometimes, Deho admitted. But fear is just a feeling. It can't actually hurt you. The plague hurts, but the fear, that's something I can control. How? Clarity asked. By remembering the good things. My sister's laugh. The ocean in Busan. The taste of my grandmother's cooking. The friends I've made here. Deho smiled at the child. When I focus on those things, the fear gets smaller. Clarity's tears continued to fall, each one crystallizing into a perfect, tiny diamond. Valeth collected them carefully, placing them in a small container. Later, Dr. Morvek would study them with amazement, unable to explain how a species without tear ducts had produced liquid emotion. But Valeth understood. She was Rindari, raised to suppress emotion, yet she had cried for Deho. Clarity was Keltharian, biologically incapable of tears, yet they cried too. Something about Deho reached past species boundaries, past biological limitations, and touched something fundamental that all living beings shared. The next day, Valeth found herself turning away visitors. Not all of them, but some. The ones who came with recording devices and cold scientific interest. The ones who looked at Deho like he was an interesting specimen rather than a person. She became fiercely protective, standing guard over his pod like a sentry. You're supposed to be impartial, Dr. Morvek reminded her. I'm supposed to care for my patients, Valeth shot back. And part of that care is protecting them from exploitation. Dr. Morvek didn't argue further. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he had noticed how the entire medical bay had changed since Deho's arrival. Patients who had been isolated now talked to each other. Species that normally avoided contact sat in common areas, sharing stories. The harsh clinical atmosphere had softened into something almost homelike. Deho began organizing his belongings on day 13. He didn't have much. A military-issue datapad, some clothes, a small photograph of his family that Sujin had sent digitally, which he'd printed on paper film at the station shop. I want you to have my jacket, he told Valeth, pointing to the uniform jacket hanging in his closet. I know it won't fit you, but maybe you could keep it? As a reminder. A reminder of what? Valeth asked, her voice thick. That you have Jung now. That you learned how to connect with others even when it hurts. Deho smiled tiredly. You'll be a better nurse for it, I think. Your patients will feel that care. Valeth took the jacket with trembling hands. It smelled like Deho. Like human sweat and the antiseptic soap from the medical bay and something else. Something uniquely him. She held it against her chest and felt something break inside her. I don't want you to die, she whispered. I know, Deho said gently. I don't want to die either. But wanting doesn't change anything. So instead of wasting energy on wanting the impossible, I'd rather spend my time grateful for what I have. And right now I have you, Valeth. I have your friendship, your care, your Jung. That's not nothing. She wanted to argue that it wasn't enough, that friendship and connection couldn't replace life. But looking at his calm face, at the peace in his eyes, she realized that for Daeho it was enough. Not because he had given up, but because he had chosen to find meaning in what remained rather than mourning what was lost. By evening, 47 different species had sent messages to the station, requesting to visit the dying human. Ambassador Yuna had to create a scheduling system. Some requests were denied, others were approved for brief visits. The station commander, Park Ji-woo, arrived personally to manage the logistics. "This has gotten complicated," Ji-woo said, standing in the observation room overlooking Daeho's pod. "He's just one man," Valeth said. "Why does everyone care so much?" Ji-woo looked at her with knowing eyes. "Because he's showing them something they've never seen before. Most species hide their dying, treat death as shameful or frightening. But humans, they've always been different. They write poems about death, create art about mortality. They face it head-on and somehow find beauty in it." He paused. "Daeho is reminding the galaxy that death is universal. And if death is universal, then maybe we're not as different as we think." Valeth watched Daeho through the glass. He was teaching Clarity another song, his voice weak but steady. The Keltharian child was humming along, creating harmonics that made the sound shimmer. 3 days left. Maybe 4. Valeth pressed her hand against the glass and felt her tears come again. She was going to miss him so much. Valeth found Dr. Morvek in his office at dawn station time. The Crolian physician was studying holographic scans with his compound eyes moving rapidly across the data streams. He didn't look up when she entered. "His cellular degradation has accelerated," Dr. Morvek said quietly. "The plague is consuming him faster now. 3 days, Valeth? Perhaps less." Valeth had known this was coming. She had watched the monitors, seen the declining numbers, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that hurt. She steadied herself against the door frame. "Does he know?" she asked. "He knows his time is short. I don't think the exact count matters to him." Dr. Morvek finally looked at her, his multifaceted eyes reflecting her image dozens of times. "You've become attached to him." "Yes," Valeth said. There was no point denying it. "That will make his passing harder for you." "I know, but I wouldn't change it." Valeth straightened her shoulders. "He asked yesterday if he could see the stars one more time. Can we move him to the observation deck?" Dr. Morvek clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "It's irregular. Moving a patient in his condition carries risks." "He's dying anyway," Valeth said more sharply than she intended. "What risk matters now?" So they moved him. It took 4 staff members and a hovering medical bed equipped with portable life support. Daeho was conscious but weak, his breathing shallow and labored. Valeth held his hand the entire journey through the station corridors, feeling how cold his skin had become. The observation deck was a massive transparent dome that offered a 360-degree view of space. Stars stretched in every direction, distant suns burning in the darkness. A nearby nebula painted part of the sky in shades of purple and blue. Daeho's medical bed was positioned in the center of the dome, and when he opened his eyes, he gasped. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Valeth looked up at the stars, trying to see what he saw. To her, they were just distant lights, cold and impersonal. But Daeho's face held such wonder, such peace, that she found herself seeing them differently. Each star was a sun. Each sun might have worlds. Each world might hold life. The universe was impossibly vast, and here they were, one human and one Rindari sharing this moment. "Which star is your home?" Valeth asked. Daeho raised a trembling hand, pointing. "That direction. Can't see it from here, too far. But Earth is out there, spinning around a yellow sun. Sujin is there, my mother. Everyone I grew up with. Do you wish you could go back?" "Every second of every day," Daeho said honestly. "But wishing doesn't change reality. I'm here, and this is where I'll end. At least the view is good." They stayed there for hours. Station Commander Park Ji-woo arrived midday, entering the observation deck with careful steps as if approaching something sacred. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with gray touching his temples. When he saw Daeho, his military composure cracked. "Lieutenant," Ji-woo said, his voice rough. "Commander," Daeho replied, attempting a salute from his bed. Ji-woo quickly crossed the distance and gently pushed his hand down.
None of that.
We're not on duty. Jiwoo pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down heavily. I got your message. Came as soon as I could. Thank you for coming, sir. Stop calling me sir. We went through the academy together, Daeho. We're friends. Jiwoo rubbed his face. This is wrong. You should have had 50 more years. You should have gone home, married someone, had children. This plague, it's not fair. No, Daeho agreed. It's not fair. But life isn't fair. We both learned that in the academy. I thought I'd lose you in combat, Jiwoo said quietly. Some mission gone wrong, some battle? That I could understand. But this, a random disease? What's the point of all your training, all your skills, if you die in a medical bay? What's the point of anything? Daeho countered gently. We all die, Jiwoo. Combat, disease, old age, it all ends the same way. The method doesn't matter as much as how we face it. They talked for a long time. Valeth gave them privacy, retreating to the edge of the observation deck where she could still monitor Daeho's vitals, but couldn't hear their conversation. She watched the two humans talk and laugh and occasionally cry. She saw Jiwoo grip Daeho's hand tightly, saw Daeho comfort his friend even though he was the one dying. This was Jong, she realized. This deep connection that transcended circumstance. Jiwoo was suffering more than Daeho in this moment, carrying the weight of watching his friend fade. And Daeho, who should have been bitter and angry, was instead offering comfort. Humans were strange. Wonderfully, inexplicably strange. When Jiwoo finally left, he pressed something into Daeho's hand. A small metal pin, the kind soldiers wore on their uniforms to mark special achievements. You earned this, Jiwoo said, for the mission on Kepler Station. I was supposed to give it to you at the ceremony next month. I won't make it to the ceremony, Daeho said with a small smile. I know, so I'm giving it to you now. Jiwoo's voice broke. You're the best soldier I've ever served with, Daeho. The best friend, too. I won't forget you. I know you won't, Daeho said. That's what makes this bearable. After Jiwoo departed, more visitors came. Ambassador Yuna brought letters from Earth, messages from Daeho's family that had been transmitted faster than light through the quantum communication network. Daeho read them with tears streaming down his face. Sujin says she's coming, he told Valeth. She's taking emergency transport. She'll be here in 3 days. 3 days. The same timeline Dr. Morvek had given. Valeth felt her chest tighten with worry. Would Daeho last that long? Could he hold on to see his sister one more time? Outside the medical bay, something unprecedented was happening. Dozens of species were gathering in the station's common areas, holding vigils in their own traditions. The Varelli burned incense that smelled like copper and rain. The Keltharians hummed in harmonic frequencies that made the station walls vibrate gently. A group of Crolians performed a death dance, their insectoid bodies moving in intricate patterns. Tae Yang, the journalist, was documenting all of it. His recordings were being broadcast across multiple systems. The dying human had become a story that united species who normally had nothing in common. They argued about politics and trade and territory, but in this moment they agreed on one thing. Daeho's death mattered. His grace mattered. His humanity mattered. Valeth didn't understand why until she was making her rounds that evening and overheard two patients talking. One was a Varelli merchant, the other a Keltharian engineer. Different species, different worlds, different everything, but they were discussing Daeho's words about Jong, about connection, about finding meaning in mortality. I never thought about it that way, the Varelli said. We Varelli believe the dead should be forgotten quickly, to ease the pain of loss. But this human, he wants to be remembered. He creates these connections deliberately, knowing they will cause pain later. Perhaps, the Keltharian replied, their voice chiming softly. The pain is worth it. If connection gives meaning, then the pain of loss is proof that the meaning was real. Valeth stood frozen in the corridor, listening. These two beings were discussing philosophy because of Daeho. They were reconsidering their own cultural beliefs because one dying human had shown them a different way to think about life and death. She returned to the observation deck and found Daeho sleeping, his face peaceful despite the machines keeping him alive. She sat in her usual chair and took his hand. It was even colder now, his pulse weak beneath her fingers. You're changing the galaxy, she whispered to him, one conversation at a time. Did you know you'd do this? When you decided to face death with grace, did you know it would ripple outward like this? Daeho didn't answer. He was sleeping deeply, conserving his failing energy. But Valeth thought she saw a slight smile on his face. The stars continued their slow rotation outside the dome. The nebula glowed in shades of purple that had no name in any language, and in the center of all that cosmic beauty, one human man slowly prepared to return to stardust. Valeth checked her chronometer. 72 hours until Sujin arrived. 72 hours for Deho to hold on. She tightened her grip on his hand. "You have to stay," she told him quietly. "Your sister is coming. You have to stay long enough to see her. Please, Deho, just a little longer." In the silence of the observation deck, surrounded by infinite stars and impossible beauty, Valeth made her own wish, not to the universe, which Deho had said didn't care about wishes, but to whatever force connected living beings across the cosmos, whatever created jong between souls. Let him stay. Just 3 more days. Let him have that goodbye. The stars gave no answer. They never did. But Valeth held on to hope anyway. Day 14 arrived with the quiet certainty of dawn. Valeth hadn't slept. She had stayed in the observation deck all night, watching Deho's monitors with growing dread. His vital signs had deteriorated steadily throughout the dark hours. His breathing had become irregular, his heartbeat erratic. By every medical standard she knew, he should have slipped into unconsciousness hours ago. But when the station's lights brightened to simulate morning, Deho opened his eyes. "Good morning, Valeth," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Valeth nearly dropped her medical scanner. "You're awake." "You're still awake, how?" "Stubborn, remember?" Deho managed a weak smile. "Kim family trait." Dr. Morvek arrived within minutes of Valeth's urgent summons. He ran scan after scan, his mandibles clicking with increasing agitation. Finally, he set down his equipment and stared at Deho with something approaching awe. "You should be dead," Dr. Morvek said bluntly. "Your organ function is at critical levels. Your cellular integrity is nearly non-existent. The plague has consumed over 80% of your healthy tissue. By every measure we have, you should have died 3 days ago." "But I didn't," Deho said. "But you didn't," Dr. Morvek echoed. "Why?" Deho thought about this. "Sujin is coming. I promised myself I'd see her one more time." "That's not medically possible," Dr. Morvek insisted. "Willpower doesn't override biology. Determination doesn't repair cellular damage. What you're doing is impossible." "Humans do impossible things sometimes," Deho said simply. "We're stubborn like that." Dr. Morvek spent the entire day running tests. He brought in specialists from other departments, medical experts from different species. They all examined Deho's data with the same confusion. His body was fighting the plague in ways that defied explanation. Not winning, not even slowing the disease's progress, but enduring far longer than any biological model predicted. "It's as if his consciousness is keeping his body functioning," one specialist said, a Varelli doctor with expertise in neurological systems. "His brain is redirecting resources, maintaining critical functions through sheer mental force. I've never seen anything like it." "Can other species do this?" Valeth asked. The Varelli shook her head. "We die when our bodies fail. Our minds cannot overcome physical damage. But humans have always been strange. Their evolutionary path emphasized adaptability, survival against odds, persistence in the face of extinction. Perhaps this is an expression of that." Valeth didn't care about the science. She only cared that Deho was still alive, still conscious, still able to smile at her when she checked his monitors. 2 more days. Sujin would arrive in 2 more days. Could he last that long? The vigils outside the medical bay intensified. Word had spread that Deho had survived past his predicted death date. Beings from dozens of species gathered in the common areas. Many of them had never prayed or hoped in their lives before, but they did now in whatever way their cultures understood prayer. The Keltharians hummed continuously, creating harmonic frequencies that resonated through the station's structure. The Varelli burned more incense, so much that the air filtration system struggled to keep up. The Crolians performed their death dance 24 hours straight, their bodies moving in endless patterns. They were all waiting, all hoping, all invested in the survival of one human soldier they'd never met. Tae Yang filmed everything. His documentary had evolved beyond a simple story about death. Now it was about life, about the refusal to surrender, about the power of connection across species barriers. Networks across the galaxy were broadcasting his footage. Billions of beings were watching Deho's struggle. Ambassador Yuna visited on day 15. She brought news that governments were issuing statements, that religious leaders from multiple faiths were discussing Daeho's endurance. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a testament to human resilience. A few cynics called it elaborate theater, though those voices were shouted down by the majority who believed. You've become a symbol, Yuna told Daeho. People are rallying around you. Human-alien relations have improved in just these few days. Conflicts that were escalating have paused. Everyone wants to see if you'll make it. No pressure then, Daeho joked weakly. But Valeth saw the strain in his face. Staying alive was costing him everything. He barely ate now. Could barely speak for more than a few minutes without exhausting himself. The pain medication was at maximum levels, but she could tell he was suffering. You can let go, she told him during the night shift when they were alone in the observation deck. If it's too hard, if the pain is too much, you can let go. No one would blame you. But Sujin, Daeho whispered, she would understand. Your sister would want you to be at peace. Daeho shook his head fractionally. One more day. Just one more day. She'll be here tomorrow evening. I can make it one more day. Valeth wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he'd already done enough, proved enough, inspired enough. But she understood. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about love. This was about Jong. Daeho would endure impossible pain for one more chance to see his sister's face. I'll help you, Valeth said. Whatever you need. I'll be here. I know, Daeho said, his cold hand squeezing hers weakly. That's what's keeping me going. Not just Sujin. You too, Valeth. All the people I've met here. Every conversation, every connection. They're all threads holding me together. Day 16 arrived. Daeho's condition had worsened dramatically. He could no longer speak, could barely open his eyes. Dr. Morvek had quietly told Valeth that this was the end. Hours now, not days. The human's impossible endurance was finally failing. The entire station held its breath. In the common areas, the vigils continued but had taken on a desperate quality. People weren't just hoping anymore. They were begging whatever forces governed the universe to grant this one human just a few more hours. Valeth sat beside Daeho's bed, holding his hand, watching the monitors display his failing vital signs. Each heartbeat took longer than the last. Each breath was a struggle. She found herself silently counting, measuring time in the spaces between his breaths. Your sister's ship docked 10 minutes ago, she told him, even though she wasn't sure he could hear. She's going through customs now. She'll be here soon, Daeho, very soon. Just hold on a little longer. She didn't know if he understood. His eyes were closed, his face gray with pain and exhaustion, but his hand twitched in hers, a tiny squeeze that might have been acknowledgement. 15 minutes passed. 20. The monitors showed heart arrhythmia, oxygen saturation dropping, brain activity flickering. Dr. Morvek stood nearby, ready to call time of death. Valeth felt tears streaming down her face. Then the door to the observation deck opened. A young woman ran in, her dark hair flying behind her, her face streaked with tears. She wore civilian clothes rumpled from days of travel, and she carried a small bag that she dropped as soon as she saw the medical bed. Daeho! Sujin shouted, running to her brother's side, and Daeho opened his eyes. It shouldn't have been possible. His body had been shutting down, his consciousness fading. But when his sister's voice reached him, when her hand gripped his, Daeho opened his eyes and smiled. Sujin, he breathed. You're here. I'm here, Sujin sobbed, pressing her forehead against his. I'm here, big brother. I'm here. Dr. Morvek stared at the monitors in shock. Daeho's vital signs had stabilized. Not improved, not reversed, but stabilized. His heart rate had steadied. His breathing had regulated. Somehow, impossibly, the dying man had pulled himself back from the edge. This is impossible, Dr. Morvek whispered. But Valeth understood. She had learned about Jong, about the connections that gave humans their strength. Daeho had stayed alive through sheer will because his sister was coming. And now that she was here, now that he could see her face and hear her voice, his body had found one last reserve of strength. Tell me about the ocean, Daeho whispered to Sujin. Tell me about Busan. And Sujin did. She talked about the beach where they used to collect shells, about the street food vendors and the festivals in their grandmother's garden. She talked about their mother's cooking and the paper lanterns and the sound of waves against the shore. Daeho listened with his eyes closed and a peaceful smile on his face. Valeth watched them, brother and sister, connected by love stronger than death, and she finally understood what made humans so remarkable. They didn't survive because they were physically superior. They survived because they refused to let go of each other. Because connection mattered more than logic and love was stronger than biology. Daeho had done the impossible. He had stayed alive 3 days past his death date through nothing but willpower and Jong. And now, with his sister beside him, he could finally rest. Sujin stayed by her brother's side for 3 days. 3 impossible, precious days that medical science couldn't explain, but that everyone who witnessed understood. Daeho had waited for his sister, and now that she was here, some deep part of him refused to let go just yet. On the first day, they mostly talked. Sujin told him about their mother, who sent her love and prayers but was too frail to make the journey herself. She talked about their old neighborhood in Busan, how the corner store where they used to buy candy had finally closed after 50 years. She showed him photos on her datapad, pictures of home that made Daeho cry. "I brought you something," Sujin said on the second day. From her bag, she pulled out a small container filled with dark earth, soil from grandmother's garden. "I thought maybe you'd like to hold it. Feel home one more time." Valeth watched Daeho's face crumble as Sujin placed the container in his shaking hands. He pressed his fingers into the soil, the same earth where he'd played as a child and wept openly. Sujin wept with him, their foreheads pressed together, sharing grief and love in equal measure. "Thank you," Daeho whispered. "Thank you for bringing me home." The vigils outside had evolved into something beautiful. What had started as desperate hope had transformed into celebration. The gathered species weren't mourning anymore. They were honoring. They shared stories about Daeho, about the conversations they'd had with him, the lessons he'd taught them. They traded memories like precious gifts. Brightness, the adult Keltharian who had been near Daeho since the beginning, organized a gathering. Representatives from 47 different species came together in the station's main hall. They didn't all speak the same language, didn't share the same customs or beliefs, but they shared Daeho's impact on their lives. "He taught me that silence isn't always strength," Brightness said, their crystalline body chiming with emotion. "That showing feeling doesn't make you weak. I've spent my entire life believing emotion was a flaw, but this human showed me that connection, caring, love. These are what make life meaningful." A Varelli merchant spoke next. "My people believe the dead should be quickly forgotten to ease pain. But Daeho taught me that pain is the price of love, and it's a price worth paying. I will remember him. I will carry his memory with honor." One by one they spoke. Each species, each individual, sharing how one dying human had changed their perspective on life and death. Taiyang recorded everything. His documentary had become the most watched broadcast in galactic history. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were following Daeho's final days, not with morbid curiosity but with genuine care. They sent messages, offered prayers in dozens of faiths, held their own vigils on distant planets. "You've united the galaxy," Ambassador Yuna told Daeho on the evening of the second day with Sujin. "Species that have been enemies for generations are talking to each other because of you. You've reminded everyone that we're all mortal, all vulnerable, all connected by the simple fact that we live and die." Daeho managed a weak smile. "I just wanted to die with dignity. I didn't mean to start a movement." "The best movements are never intentional," Yuna said. "They happen because someone lives their truth and others recognize that truth in themselves." On the third day with Sujin, Daeho asked to record final messages, not just for his family but for various species he'd met. His voice was failing now, each word an effort, but he insisted. "For the Keltharians," he whispered into the recording device Sujin held. "Don't be afraid of emotion. It's not weakness. It's proof that you're alive, that things matter to you. Let yourselves feel. Let yourselves connect. For the Varelli," he continued after a rest, "remember you're dead. Carry them with you. The pain of loss is just love with nowhere to go. Don't run from it. Honor it. For the Rindari," and here he looked at Valeth, who stood nearby with tears flowing freely down her blue face. "You are capable of such deep feeling. Don't hide it. Don't suppress it. The world needs your compassion, your care. Let people see your hearts." He recorded messages for a dozen more species. Advice, encouragement, small pieces of wisdom he'd gathered in his 32 years of life. By the time he finished, he was exhausted, barely conscious. Sujin held his hand and Valeth held his other hand, and they sat in silence for a long time. "I want to do something," Daeho said eventually. A celebration, not a funeral. A celebration of life. Can we do that? Before I go? So they organized it. Station Commander Park Ji-woo opened the main observation deck to everyone. Hundreds of beings gathered, packed into the space beneath the transparent dome where stars shone overhead. They brought food from their homeworlds, shared dishes representing dozens of cultures. They brought music and art and stories. Daeho was brought in on his medical bed, his life support equipment humming quietly beneath the sounds of celebration. He was barely able to keep his eyes open, but he smiled at the gathered crowd. The Crolian musician played again, the haunting melody that had made Daeho cry before. But this time others joined in. Avarelli added a rhythmic clicking. A human from another ship contributed a violin. The Keltharians provided harmonic overtones. The music swelled, a blend of species and sounds that should have clashed but instead created something beautiful. People danced. Different species, different body types, different concepts of movement, all sharing the floor in joyful chaos. Clarity, the young Keltharian who had learned to cry, danced closest to Daeho's bed, their crystalline body refracting the starlight into rainbows. "This is perfect," Daeho whispered to Sujin. "This is exactly what I wanted." "What did you want?" Sujin asked, holding back tears. "To matter. To connect. To know that my life meant something." Daeho looked around at the celebrating crowd. "They're here because they care. Because somehow in these few weeks I became part of their lives. That's enough. That's more than enough." Valeth leaned close. "You've given us all something precious, Daeho. You've shown us how to live and how to die. You've taught us that grace is possible even in the hardest moments. We won't forget you." "I know you won't," Daeho said. He looked at each person around his bed. Sujin, his beloved sister. Valeth, who had become family in these short weeks. Commander Ji-woo, his old friend. Ambassador Yuna, who had been his first visitor. Dr. Morvek, who had fought so hard to save him. Thank you all. For everything. For caring. For being here. For showing me that I mattered. "You mattered," Sujin said fiercely, gripping his hand. "You matter." Present tense. "You're still here." "For now," Daeho agreed. "But soon I won't be. And that's okay. Death isn't the opposite of life, Sujin. It's just a part of it. I've lived well. I've loved and been loved. I've made friends across the stars. I've changed lives, even if just in small ways." He smiled, peaceful and certain. "That's enough. That's a life well lived." The celebration continued around them. Species that had never interacted before were sharing stories, laughing together, crying together. The medical bay had become a place of community, of connection, of jong spreading outward in ripples that would touch the entire galaxy. As the station's night cycle began and the artificial lights dimmed to let the stars shine brighter, Daeho closed his eyes. Sujin kissed his forehead. Valeth held his hand and sang one of the Korean lullabies he'd taught her. Around them, the celebration quieted to a gentle hum of voices and soft music. "I'm tired now," Daeho whispered. "So tired." "Then rest," Sujin said through her tears. "We're here. We're all here. You don't have to hold on anymore." "I love you," Daeho said. "Tell Mother I love her." "Tell everyone." "We know," Valeth said softly. "We've always known. That's what you taught us. Love doesn't need to be said to be real." Daeho smiled one last time. The stars shone above him, countless points of light in the infinite dark. The soil from his grandmother's garden rested in a container by his bed, bringing the scent of home. His sister held one hand and his friend held the other, and around them, dozens of species stood in silent witness. He had done what he set out to do. He had died with dignity, surrounded by love, having touched more lives than he'd ever know. His last breath came quietly, peacefully, like a man settling into sleep after a long and satisfying day. And across the galaxy, billions of beings who had watched his journey mourned a man they'd never met, but who had changed them all forever. 3 months after Lieutenant Kim Daeho passed away, the station held a memorial service. Representatives from 47 species attended in person. Thousands more watched via broadcast from their homeworlds. The main observation deck, where Daeho had spent his final days, had been transformed into a memorial space. Valeth stood near the front, wearing Daeho's uniform jacket over her medical uniform. It still didn't fit her Rindari frame, but she wore it anyway as he had asked her to. In her hand she held a small container of soil from Earth, a gift from Sujin, who stood beside her with quiet dignity. The service began with silence. A full minute where hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds simply stood together remembering. Then Commander Park Jiwoo stepped forward to speak. 3 months ago I watched my friend die. Jiwoo began, his voice steady but emotional. I've lost soldiers before. Good people who died in combat serving their duty. But Daeho's death was different. Not because it was slower or more painful, but because of how he chose to face it. Jiwoo gestured to the crowd. Look around. Keltharians standing beside Varelli. Crolians sharing space with Rindari. Species that barely acknowledged each other 3 months ago are now friends, colleagues, allies. Daeho did that. One human soldier, through nothing but grace and kindness, reminded us of our shared mortality and our shared capacity for connection. He picked up a datapad. Daeho recorded many messages in his final days. He gave me permission to share this one. Jiwoo's voice cracked slightly as he read. Death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it. I've lived well. I've loved and been loved. I've made connections that will outlast my body. That's enough. That's everything. Don't mourn me. Celebrate that we got to share time together. Celebrate that we mattered to each other. And take what I've taught you, carry it forward, and create your own Jong with others. That's my legacy. That's what I want to leave behind. Valeth found herself crying again. She had cried so much over the past 3 months that Dr. Morvek had worried about her health. But these were different tears. Not grief alone, but a mixture of sadness and gratitude and love that had no name in any language she knew. Dr. Morvek spoke next. The Crolian physician approached the podium with careful steps. I am a scientist, he began. I deal in facts, in measurable data, and biological certainties. When Lieutenant Kim arrived at my medical bay, I gave him 2 weeks to live. He survived 21 days, 3 times longer than any other patient with his diagnosis. Dr. Morvek paused, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. I spent weeks analyzing his case, trying to understand the biological mechanisms that allowed his survival. I published a paper titled Psychological Resilience as a Survival Factor. But after months of study, I've concluded that science cannot fully explain what happened. Daeho stayed alive through willpower, through love, through connections that defied biological limitations. He taught me that medicine is not just about treating bodies. It's about honoring the spirit that inhabits those bodies. Ambassador Choi Yuna stood next. In my career as a diplomat, I've negotiated treaties, resolved conflicts, and built bridges between worlds. But I've never seen anything change interspecies relations as quickly as Daeho's death. In 3 months, we've had breakthroughs in negotiations that have been stalled for years. Species are talking to each other, really talking, sharing their fears about mortality, their hopes for meaning, their desire for connection. Yuna smiled sadly. Daeho once told me that he was just one soldier, that people shouldn't make a fuss over him. But he was wrong. He wasn't just one soldier. He was a catalyst. He showed the galaxy that humans don't fear death, they fear not mattering. And in showing us that, he gave every species permission to admit the same fear, to be vulnerable, to reach for connection even when it's scary. Brightness stepped forward then, the Keltharian's crystalline body chiming softly. I cannot cry anymore, Brightness said, their voice carrying the unique harmonics of their species. After Daeho passed, my body returned to normal Keltharian function, but I remember what crying felt like. I remember the release, the acknowledgement of feeling. Daeho gave me that gift, and I carry it in my memory. Young Clarity joined Brightness, the child's body smaller but shining just as brightly. Daeho taught me that being scared is okay. That fear doesn't make you weak. I was so frightened in the medical bay, and he sang to me. He made me feel safe even though he was the one dying. Clarity's voice wavered. I miss him. Is that what grief feels like? Yes, Valeth said softly, speaking for the first time. That's grief. And it means you loved him? I did, Clarity said simply. I still do. Sujin stood then, carrying a small sapling in a pot. My brother loved Earth, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He loved the ocean, the gardens, the green-growing things. Before he died, he asked me to plant a tree for him, not on Earth but here, on this station where he spent his final days. She walked to the corner of the observation deck where a special growing space had been prepared. With trembling hands, she placed the sapling in the soil, earth dirt mixed with compounds from 47 different worlds. This tree will grow here, Sujin said, fed by soil from across the galaxy, nourished by the connections my brother made. It will be a living reminder that death is not an ending. It's a transformation. Deho's body is gone, but his impact continues to grow. Species after species came forward to add their own soil to the tree's planting space. Forelli merchants brought red clay from their desert world. Keltharians contributed crushed crystal dust that would help the tree's roots absorb nutrients. Crolians added mineral-rich earth from their hive cities. Each species, each gift, a testament to how one human had touched them all. Taeyang's documentary played on every screen in the observation deck. 3 months of editing had transformed hours of footage into a powerful narrative. The journalist had titled it simply, The Dying Human. But it wasn't about death. It was about life, about dignity, about the power of grace under pressure. The documentary was already being studied in schools across the galaxy. Philosophy classes discussed Deho's concept of Zhong. Medical schools taught his case as an example of psychological factors in patient care. Diplomatic academies used footage of the memorial gatherings as lessons in cross-cultural unity. Recruitment for human-alien cultural exchange programs has increased 300%, Commander Jiwoo announced. Species want to learn from humans now. They want to understand what makes you so resilient, so adaptable, so good at creating connections. Deho opened doors that diplomacy couldn't. Valeth had experienced this personally. She had returned to her homeworld 2 weeks earlier to request a sabbatical from her medical posting. Instead, she'd been offered a position creating a new training program for Rindari nurses. Compassionate terminal care, they called it. Teaching her people how to connect with dying patients, how to show emotion, how to honor death instead of fearing it. Deho taught me that suppressing emotion doesn't make you stronger, Valeth told the assembled crowd. It makes you alone. My people have spent generations building walls around our hearts, believing that caring too much would destroy us. But caring didn't destroy me. It changed me. It made me better. I will spend the rest of my life teaching other Rindari what Deho taught me. That connection is worth the risk of pain. As the service concluded, something remarkable happened. Without coordination or planning, the various species began to sing, each in their own way, in their own languages, but somehow creating a harmony. The Keltharians hummed their crystal tones. The Varelli contributed rhythmic clicking. The humans sang in Korean the words Deho had taught them. The Crolians added percussive elements with their mandibles. The sound filled the observation deck, rose toward the transparent dome, and seemed to reach for the stars beyond. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. Different species, different voices, unified by shared grief and shared love for a man who had shown them all how to live and how to die. When the music faded, Soo-jin approached the sapling tree. She had one more gift. From her pocket, she pulled out a small collection of shells, worn smooth by ocean waves on a beach in Busan. She placed them carefully around the tree's base. He loved collecting these with me, Soo-jin said. Each one has a story, he used to say. Well, this tree has a story too. A story about a soldier who faced death with courage. A story about connections that transcended species and cultures. A story about love being stronger than mortality. She stepped back, tears streaming down her face. I miss you, big brother. But you were right. You mattered. You still matter. And I'll make sure everyone remembers. The station had voted unanimously to rename the medical bay. It was now called the Kim Dae-ho Center for Compassionate Care. A plaque near the entrance read, in memory of Lieutenant Kim Dae-ho, who taught the galaxy that death is not the enemy, but a teacher. May all who enter here find the courage to face mortality with grace and the wisdom to cherish every connection they make. As the memorial service ended and beings slowly departed, Valeth remained behind. She stood by the sapling tree, one hand resting on Dae-ho's uniform jacket draped over her shoulders, and looked up at the stars.